Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hello, this is the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com, and I'm here with
Dr. Howie Jacobson of AskHowie.com.
And neither of us are medical doctors, just for absolute clarity. Howie, I have another Nietzsche quote I thought I would run by you and see how we could apply it to impulse control with food and everything else.
Okay.
You open to that?
Uh-huh.
Okay. The quote is that the higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. And that's Friedrich Nietzsche.
Ooh.
Here's my very brief explanation, how I apply it to food, but I thought we could have a discussion about it. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. Crowd psychology always exerts pressure to go along to get along, or else face feeling ostracized from the tribe. This necessarily drags us down to embrace the lowest common denominator, especially when it comes to food. People fear the tribe will fall apart if everybody isn't eating approximately the same way, but you don't have to buy into tribology. You can recognize it for the primitive fear it represents. You can choose to soar regardless of what others around you are doing. The trick is often just refocusing your attention back on them and learning to alleviate their fear. It'll be a little terrifying for the people you love, your friends, colleagues, and others, to see you embrace a radically different relationship with food. But all you need to do is remember, you're just you, minus the food obsession, weight, and yo-yo dieting. If you're okay about it, they'll be okay about it. And show them, don't tell them. Don't explain that chocolate is bad for you or you don't eat processed sugar anymore because it raises your triglycerides or anything like that. You don't have to draw attention to the things which scare them. You just have to be the person that you want to be with food, or like Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. The higher we soar, the smaller we appear to those who cannot fly. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a big one, because I found the best predictor of anyone's behavior is what the people around them are doing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's those fascinating research studies by like Nicholas Christakis of Yale and his colleagues. Do you know about those?
No.
Where they found that even people like 2 degrees of separation from you have a huge impact on your life. So if like somebody became obese, then like friends of friends started becoming obese.
Really?
The impact of unseen things on us is huge.
So we're experiencing social pressure 2 degrees of separation apart from us, and we don't even know it.
Yes. Yes. So we are so sensitive to being influenced without necessarily realizing it, that you can imagine how people's, weirdness detectors are throwing off alarm after alarm when they see us diverging from that group norm.
So here's what I would say, though. I would say that unseen influence requires an ambiguous definition of what you consider healthy eating to be, because unseen influence exerts pressure on your ability to make good decisions about food. But if you've reviewed your troubled areas and you've made decisions about what role you want each of those foods or behaviors to play in your life. I had a client who was a food critic, and she had to eat in restaurants every day for 90 days, and she was traveling all around, and she was tired and taking airplanes and driving around and staying in hotels. And it's the exact situation where most people would binge their hearts out. And she decided what she was going to do is that before she walked into any restaurant, she was just going to write down exactly what she was going to eat. I think she logged it in MyFitnessPal or something like that. And she didn't let herself go into the restaurant without doing that. I won't tell you her name, but it was General Lady who made all the decisions, and then it's like she was dictating the orders when she put him into the MyFitnessPal, and then private lady went into the restaurants and actually executed the orders. The reason I think that's relevant is that people have trouble in restaurants because restaurants are very tempting food situations. Their whole business model rests on seducing your food monster into eating things that are not necessarily in your best interest. But if you make those decisions beforehand, then you're not leaning on your willpower at the moment of temptation. So you have this tripwire that's set up so that you're alert the moment that your food monster wakes up and you're being influenced. I would say it's about the same thing in terms of unseen social influences, that if you know what role chocolate plays in your life, or you know that you only want to have 2 bags of potato chips per week, talking about the small bags, or you know that you only eat 1 plate of food or 1 serving of any main dish when you're at a restaurant, then if you know, and all these other things are just feelings and thoughts, but you have the behavior that you've defined and that's it. If you're walking around thinking I'm just going to eat healthy 90% of the time, well, that's great, but then you're subject to having to make a decision about is this the 10% of the time or not, and you're much more vulnerable to unseen influences. So that's my take on that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, conscious intention provides a kind of gyroscopic stability that is stronger than influence, even the ones you aren't aware of. I think though that when you diverge, other people don't have the benefit of your methodology, right? And so other people feel extremely threatened by something that's outside of their perspective. When you were talking about the quote, I thought of 2 quotes it reminded me of. One is, I think this was just a cartoon. I don't remember where it comes from, but it's got a picture of a butterfly flying in the air, and there's 2 caterpillars on the ground, and one of them glances up at the butterfly and says, "You'd never get me up in one of those things."
That's great.
And the second quote was one of several pieces of life advice that my father gave me. He said, "If you want to be a radical, dress like a conservative.
What does that mean?
If you look like you fit in, you can get away with an awful lot."
I see. That's interesting.
He was a radical, progressive activist and politician in the 1960s, and he always wore a suit and tie. And he saw the hippie generation with, long hair and unwashed tie-dye, ripped clothes, bare feet. I get what they're about, but no one in the halls of power is taking them seriously.
Right. People's alerts go up and they say tree hugger.
Yeah.
Crunchy granola tree hugger.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking. Like, if you want to get by with as little interference from other people, like what you were saying, like, don't call yourself out. Don't make a big deal about it.
If you're capable of it, some people aren't capable, but let's say you don't have bread at all in your day-to-day life. If you're capable of it and you can allow yourself to have a half a slice at a restaurant, people are more likely to look at you and say, wow, he or she is, they've lost this weight and their skin is glowing and they seem so radiant and present, and they didn't have to give up bread. I wonder what they're doing. Right. And so you have more of an influence and there's a lot less tension than if you say, I'm sorry, I don't eat bread. Right?
Yeah, you can absolutely stand for yourself. Yesterday, I was reading a LinkedIn post by someone I know who's a very, very strong animal rights activist vegan. And she was saying one of the big mistakes she made in the past was refusing to go to people's houses or go to meals with people because she couldn't stand to see all the dead animals on their plates.
Right.
It made her feel better. And her nervous system, she felt couldn't have taken it, but she would have preferred to be able to go and laugh and joke and smile and do her own thing and be in a position to influence.
Right.
Right. So I don't think it's so much like you have to lie or pretend that you're a bread eater when you're not. When you're either making a big show of it or spending all your energy trying to hide it, both of those attract attention.
That's a really good way to look at it. I don't know if you find this, but I find that people who hang out with me start to eat healthier. I'm kind of settled about how I order in a restaurant and, the way that I eat. And they see me having a big green smoothie every morning. And I'm not a pusher. I'm not a militant Whole Foods person who says you have to eat this way. And so they tend to come along. The whole struggle I found was mostly internal. Once in a while, I'll find someone who wants to have an argument about it. But mostly, I found that as long as I'm okay about it, they're okay about it. I did get a little fed up with someone the other day. They were insisting that we were hunters, and I had worked really hard to connect with her and make sure she was okay about the way that I ate. But then she started grilling me at dinner and telling me that we were hunter-gatherers, not just gatherers. And I always say I'm a lover, not a fighter. I prefer to influence with kindness than with. Sometimes people attack you straight on. What do you do in that situation?
It hasn't happened in a long time. You know, that most interesting man in the world meme from like the Dos Equis beer
Yeah,
commercial. So I
yeah.
saw one, it says like, I don't always tell people I'm a vegan, but when I do, they all of a sudden become an evolutionary biologist, a nutritionist, a scientist.
Yeah.
I used to fight, you know, especially when I was in the thick of writing research books and I had like 799, papers at my fingertips in my head. If I think that they have something to teach me, I will be curious.
Hmm.
Like, oh, where does that statistic come from? What do you know about that? Most people, we just change the subject.
Yeah.
I discovered that I wasn't a good debater and I didn't enjoy myself while doing it.
That's about how I am. And if people want to learn, they want to know, then it's funny because it's not like like the vegan ethos is be a voice for the voiceless. Animals are being tortured and somebody has to stand up for them. And I think that that's true. And I think that Tolstoy said, as long as there are slaughterhouses, there will be battlefields. Where turning a blind eye to the suffering we're causing of another sentient animal. If you take it to that level, then you should be saying something every place that you can. It's not like I don't want to have an impact like that, but maybe it's my training as a psychologist where you influence people over time and you really look for a way in. And you don't necessarily influence them with a big fight, but you influence them with love.
Yeah, I think there's a broad spectrum of ways to be an activist. And I think there's enough of a spectrum that there's room for everyone to do it their way, right? So if your way is health and joy, then you do much more good following your own path than trying to, emulate someone who like throws paint at people wearing fur coats or screams at people in the fish counter at Whole Foods.
I also think that even when you talk to some of the militant vegans, there are animal products in toothpaste. Are they buying all vegan shoes and vegan clothing? It's not like people are vegan or not vegan. There's kind of a continuum, and people make a decision not to eat animals, but you could still be doing harm even if you're not eating them. I actually came at this through health more than the ethics. I wound up being surrounded by a lot of vegan people who had a lot of activist pressure. Like, I don't disagree with them. I'm not sure we're probably going to get hate mail from this.
From animals.
I'm probably going to lose some friends because of this, but I'm not sure that the aggressive approach is the best way to go about it.
We can look at research, right? We can look at like what created movements for change. I don't feel like everyone in the world should go vegan necessarily. Like I think there's a
spectrum.
There's a whole indigenous worldview that is as respectful to animals as veganism is for me. And I don't want to say, people who, in the outback of Australia or the jungles of, the Amazon need to go vegan to be good people. If we want to move towards a world without needless animal suffering and subjugation, we're so far from that right now that I would want to look at like what historically, like how did the divine right of kings kind of end? How did we go from a nation of smokers to smoking being somewhat marginalized? How did Mothers Against Drunk Driving succeed? Like, how did gay marriage become legal when 12 years earlier you couldn't, liberal presidential candidates couldn't come out in favor of it? So I want to look at like where there have been these huge shifts and learn from those movements.
Is there anything that you can say in your current state of knowledge about that?
Well, one is you take the wins you can get. So for example, the whole gay rights movement was going nowhere until a group of legal scholars decided that the thing to do was to lobby to get the Psychological Association to take homosexuality out of the
The
diagnostic
disease category, right?
a disease category. It was the librarians. They wanted homosexual studies to not be lumped in with pathologies. That was before even they went to the APA. So like you would think like, okay, so gay people who are having to live closeted lives or being discriminated against or in fear for their lives, would they really care where a book in the Library of Congress was shelved? No, we need to, storm the ramparts. And yet that was a beginning. For a lot of causes, you need, the whole Martin Luther King arc of justice, bend slowly perspective. Like this is not something that we're going to turn around overnight. This may take more lifetimes than I'm going to be here.
Interesting. So you have to be willing to take one step at a time.
Yeah, you can be effective or you can be right. And being right feels way better.
Which is the quintessential problem in couples therapy, helping people see that. If you go all the way back to the Nietzsche quote, I did not mean for it to say, when you know how to fly and the further you soar, the smaller you appear to people on the ground. I did not mean for that to seem like I was taking a superior position. I'm thinking about this very carefully. Do I think my way of life is better than other people's way of life? There's some ways maybe I do, but I don't feel like that's a good position to have. I like my life a lot better than I would if I was following the other position. So I like my life a lot better now that I don't eat chocolate and I don't eat a lot of the junk I used to eat than the way that it was when I used to eat that stuff. And I would like to share that with people. I mean, it would make me happy if there was less of that stuff around and more people were eating the way that I was eating because I'd feel less isolated. But I don't think that I'm better than other people because I don't eat perfectly. I've certainly made a lot of mistakes over the years, so I'm trying to figure out maybe you can help me with this. How do we reconcile the fact that it's true that when you feel like you're soaring with food, when you feel like you've conquered the lifelong problems that you've had and you've become a noticeably different person with food than you were before, that it frightens the people around us and it engenders social pressure to eat otherwise. And if you're not careful, you can get dragged down to the lowest common denominator. How do you reconcile that with not wanting to be supercilious or not wanting to look down on people or not wanting to come across as looking down on people?
It's complicated because when you've taken the red pill and you see everybody else hooked up to as batteries to the machine, and there is a way in which you don't necessarily feel superior, but you feel sort of fortunate and more informed. But then, of course, the term red pill, the scariest 4 words in the world, are do your own research, right? Because, most of the people I know who think they've done their own research, to me, are full of like crazy conspiracy theories and have no tether in reality.
People don't really understand what research is. Like you and I don't know what your training was, but I imagine there was a good deal of scientific thinking involved in getting a PhD in education. I spent 9 years studying research methodology and how to lie with statistics and how to spot methodological flaws. And I do think that they're 2 separate issues. I think that when it comes to the whole foods or veganism issue, that it is easier to get supercilious and think that you're better than people because you can see them supporting the torture. And I think that's dangerous to allow yourself to start to feel superior and better than everybody else. But I think that when it comes to eating less processed food, I do feel like that's a superior position. I think we shouldn't be ashamed of that. Like there's cardboard in the food supply and you have to be able to stand up and say that's not food and eating whole foods is better than eating cardboard. I think we have to say some opinions are better than other opinions and there is such a thing as consensually validated truth and not everybody's opinion is equally as good as everybody else's opinion. And I think that occasionally I get wound up in twisting myself into a pretzel so that I try to consider everybody else's opinion equally, but cardboard's not food.
Yeah. I think for me, the distinction is, am I treating other humans with respect?
Yeah.
Am I making them the enemy? Right? Am I making the person who's been brainwashed their whole life the enemy because they are hooked into a system that turned them into who they are?
Right.
And again, it's much easier to have enemies than to engage in systems thinking. If you have enemies, you can just kill your enemies, right? Like most Hollywood movies solve their problem through violence. I can't think of very many movies that deal with systemic root causes.
That's true. No, and it's the difference between a sociological perspective versus a purely psychological perspective. But even in psychology, it's easy to blame your patient. It's easy to say, well, they're being impossible, or I just can't seem to get through to them. There's a lot more work and responsibility involved in saying the onus is on the communicator. And if I'm not getting through to them, it's because I haven't worked hard enough at understanding what they're frightened of and how to communicate to them in such a way that they'll listen, or how to make them feel loved and safe enough so that they're willing to think new thoughts and try new things. It's a much more compassionate position, but it's much harder because there's work and responsibility involved there.
Yeah, well, and we also live in a society that nourishes the otherness. It nourishes the hatred. It nourishes the judgment, the looking down, in the same way that it makes it much easier to eat badly than to eat well. For me, like one of the things I look for all the time is a community, a referent group, a bunch of people, almost like going to a church, almost like going every day to an AA meeting to validate the worldview that I want to live.
Yeah.
It doesn't replenish itself.
Oh, it's like a campfire. You have to keep putting logs on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that's in line with our understanding that identity is at least somewhat tied to the community that you're in and having people reflect who you are to you. As you get older and more mature, you're supposed to be able to maintain that from a more independent perspective. But we do understand that there's no such thing as a completely independent person. Really, nobody's an island, and we require those logs on the campfire. We require some reflection of the values that we have.
Yeah. The other thing that studying the scientific method has given me is a healthy amount of doubt as to any of my views.
Ain't that the truth? Oh, my God.
Like, I'm not sure. I think this is the way it is, but...
If you asked me 10 years ago, I would have told you something completely different.
Yeah. I'm not even sure any of us exist. This could be a simulation.
Dude. I haven't done the doobies in like 40 years, but that one, to really understand that, I think I'd have to do that. I'm not advocating that, you guys. What's the practical takeaway?
You go first.
Okay, well, the practical takeaway is not that you have to be a vegan or eat any particular way. The takeaway is that when you figure out how to change yourself, we provide a lot of methodology for change. And when you do change yourself and you start acting differently than you used to around food or anything else that used to be a struggle, there will be some social pressure to drag you down. And it's worth taking the time to settle yourself down about what you're doing and who you are, and to kind of examine those social interactions and ask yourself, are you engaging in a debate which doesn't really respect the other person's point of view? Are you engaging in an unnecessary debate? Could you just be the change that you want to see in the world, like Gandhi said? Be comfortable with your new self and not put the pressure on them to validate who you are. And if you settle yourself down, would that be 80% of the battle? That's what I think.
Yeah, I echo that. I was talking to somebody the other day about what you taught me about the extinction curve. And when the urge comes back with a vengeance, doesn't mean anything's gone wrong.
It means something's going right.
Yeah. And so just in terms of preparation, like recognizing that this stuff is going to happen. You're going to have social interactions that are going to challenge your resolve or challenge your relationships. And it's an opportunity to be graceful. It's an opportunity to be yourself. And it's an opportunity to be true to what you care about. So for most people, they care about more than just, whether they have abs or what their A1C is. They also care about being a type of person in the world. So it's a chance to, to explore doing both.
And to recognize that there is a complexity we need to embrace. I owe to my old business partner the observation that overeating is not a unitary habit, it's a collection of habits. Among those habits is how you behave with your new eating behaviors in the context of your social interactions. There's how you behave at home, there's your shopping habits, there's your preparation habits, there are your thinking habits, there are how you manage the stimuli and food cues and triggers. there are a wide variety of aspects to becoming a different person with food. And rather than letting that scare you, to remember, even though there are a wide variety of them, they are finite. And when you start to encounter the social pressure, if you get a little help with it, obviously we do that, you get a little help with that, or you journal about it, or you figure out how you're going to manage it, then you'll be better the next time and the next time and the next time. And if you embrace the complexity and don't interpret that this is impossible, don't interpret that, it's just overwhelming, you're never going to get there, you will get there. It's just how it is. That's what Glenn has to say.
All right.
Okay, you guys. Thanks, Howie.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.